Oops, this is the chair that makes the noise. Go in the other chair.
So we're about 1 minute out. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and once I let you guys know that you're live, you'll be live. Sound good?
Am I live right now as soon as you stop sharing?
I'm going to stop sharing now and give it a second to...
And then just, should I start in then?
And you're good to go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our, what is this, week 27, I think, of our live painting thing. Decided to go for broke today and do something that's relatively involved and dealing with greens and a blue sky. Since we don't have one here right now, I thought I'd paint one. My palette today is the Radiant White. I have a Hansa Yellow. I have a, because I'm going to need that for the greens. I have a Naples Yellow Light, Yellow Ochre, Cad Orange Deep, Alizarin Crimson, Ultramarine Blue. I threw some Radiant Blue out just because it'll help a little bit. Some Sap Green and some Asphaltum. That'll give me some nice rich darks. First thing I'm going to do is get a sky in there really quick. I'm going to just kind of get an approximate sky that I think is going to be nice. That's maybe a little dark. And I'm using a little rosemary filbert today, right in the beginning, instead of my gesso brush. Although I probably should be using a gesso brush just because I cover so much more faster.
Can you run over the palette again?
Yeah, the palette is Radiant White. I have a Hansa Yellow. I have a Naples Yellow Light. I have a Yellow Ochre. I have a Cad Orange or Cad Red Light, either one. This looks more like a Cad Red Light, but it says Cad Orange. Cad Orange hue. Maybe that's why it's a hue. Okay. I have a Alizarin Crimson, which I always have. There's certain colors I always have. You guys probably are becoming aware of that. Ultramarine Blue, I always have. A Radiant Blue, which I'm using right now, along with white. Just to kind of get an approximate sky and kind of a pretty blue sky. Like I said, we don't have one here. Sap Green, which I almost always have in my palette. And Asphaltum, as opposed to an umber today. I think last week I used an umber, today I'm using an Asphaltum. And, you know, people ask me why. I don't know. It's kind of what I put my hands on. If I know I need a lot of darks, then I'm probably going to use more of the Asphaltum. If my darks aren't quite as dense. Here I've got quite some pretty good darks that I know I'm going to be using. So it's probably why I grabbed the Asphaltum. So there we go, a kind of sky blocked in a little bit. I want to paint over kind of some of these tree shapes that are going to happen here. As opposed to right at the edge. Boy, it's bouncing back and forth with me. Okay. I'm going to go back to one of my gesso brushes and I'm going to lay kind of, actually, I think what I'm going to do is stay with this brush right now. I'll use the other brushes. I'm going to take some ochre, some white, and I've still got some residue of that blue in and maybe a little sap green, a little more ochre. I want it a little bit warm, right about here. I want that to be a little darker than the sky. Not a lot darker, but a little bit darker. So maybe a little more ochre, a little bit more sap. A little more ochre. Let's try it again. It's a little darker. It's probably about what I want. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we're just kind of get that in there. I'm going to mix. I'm going to use a lot of what I call broken color. So I'm going to mix other colors into that. One of the reasons I picked this is because of the greens. I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of play with various greens. So I just picked up a little of the Cad Orange because I see it getting quite warm. So I'm going to kind of block that in a little bit right there. So you can kind of see, we just kind of get a tone in there. I'm going to throw, just so I have a little bit more broken color, throw a little more Cad Orange into it. I don't want it to look too flat. And that's why I'm mixing other colors. And I do see these things. It's a matter of training your eye to see warms within cools. And that's kind of what this exercise today is for me. It's kind of a practice of painting warms into cools and cools back into warms. Not one or the other, but both. And it happens everywhere. It keeps your painting from looking very static and very much like you just laid in a kind of a machined color that you just kind of pick up and put it in there. So I've often in class referred to this as, to a degree, color searching. So you're approximating what you see, but you're really searching out some of the warms that stay in that same, oh, there's a nice strong warm. That's probably a little more than I want, but so we'll just push that back into the color there. And I got a little bit of extra radiant blue in there, and that doesn't bother me. Kind of like the shocking aspect of that. Maybe we'll bring a little bit of it over in here so it doesn't stay one flat color. To me, that's okay.
Excuse me, Benjamin wants to know if the sky is one color. Did you mix?
It's one color right now. It's basically
that you mixed up.
That I have not done any I will do variations in that, I hope. I don't like leaving a sky tremendously flat like that, but right now I want to keep moving.
And you used what?
I used radiant blue and white. Just that, pretty simple. Nothing real tricky about it. A little bit more ochre. Apply a little thick paint in there. It's kind of fun. A little early for that, but what the heck, huh? Okay, I'm going to set that little filbert down. I'm going to go to my gesso brush here, and I need to kind of get those trees in as kind of to begin with a dark shape. So blue, ultramarine, green, and a little bit of asphaltum. Too much asphaltum, maybe mix a little. I don't want to go as dark as I can go, so I'm throwing a little radiant blue in because it's got white in it. It'll lighten it up a little bit. That looks pretty dark. That looks pretty good. That's good enough to start with. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little terp, a little medium, because I want a lot of coverage. So you can see what the difference as soon as I added that. And it's laid in kind of thin right now. Kind of a scumble. Haven't messed with the edges yet. Want to get the mass in, then we'll go back and deal with those edges. So we're going to, I'm running out of the color. Didn't mix up enough. A little green, a little blue, a little bit more blue, a little radiant to lighten it up, and a little asphaltum. And boy, I'm really close. So, and I don't care if I'm exact. That's one of the things. Keep in mind, being close is fine. Being exact, again, it gets very mechanical. It's almost too scientific when you try and be too exact. Nature is not. Nature has so many various color nuances that you can let accidents happen and they can actually work for you. A little bit more medium and a little bit more. I'll just kind of just push the stuff around. I just want to get a base in there so I can go back to my good brushes. Just kind of laying all this kind of stuff in. Just kind of a nice neutral mass. It's a lot of stuff to get in here in 90 minutes. There's quite a bit of architecture, which I will play with. Play a little bit with some of those loose edges there. But I don't want that. Yeah, that's right. That's what I want. Gotta stuff like this, when you get things that are this complicated, it is so easy to lose your place, as opposed to if you're just doing a head painting. Just doing a head painting, you're concentrating on that head. When you get into a landscape, you can be an extremely organic type of landscape. You can be a little all over the place. But when you get into something that's got architecture, my gosh, you've got all of a sudden drawing and perspective come into play. And you're looking all over the place. You're not just looking at a building. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 different buildings here. So initially, that's what I want. Now I'm going to go back and grab, let's see what I'm going to get. I'm going to grab, I got a great Rosemary number 8 filbert. And just because I'm going into those edges, I'm going to work. Again, I ran out of that paint. Little green, little brown, little ultramarine, and a little radiant blue, so it doesn't go too dark. I actually made it too light, so a little bit more brown, a little bit more blue, and I get it right up to where, look at that, almost, well, I'm a little too dark. Okay, so we're going to kind of take this brush and we're just going to push it a little bit here and there. See, push. And as opposed to pull, I can pull too. I can just lay that. This has got such a wonderful tip on it, you guys. There you go. You want some of those things that look like accidental little pieces of the tree kind of coming out there. And again, if you don't have it exact, doesn't matter, because trees aren't exact. That tree, if I went back today, this is up near a town called Bodega, before you get to Bodega Bay here in Sonoma County. And excuse me, it's not Bodega, this is Tamales. It's in Marin County. And if I went back today, I'm sure the tree would have changed shape. So that's why I'm saying you don't have to be exact with that when you're painting a tree. Much different when you're painting a figure, obviously. If you guys recall last week when I did a figure, I couldn't be wrong. It's not like you're painting a coffee cup and you're getting that handle too thick. You can't make an arm too long. Here I can make a branch too long, right? Doesn't hurt at all. So
What brush is that again?
It is a Rosemary Filbert number 8. And I'm just by lifting up and I'm pushing the paint slightly, and I gotta keep it wet at this point. Paint can't get too dry because I want it to apply on top of that blue. So we're gonna put a few of these little strokes out like this, make it feel. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is I know that if I had a lot more time, I would probably go back and refine some of these tree shapes and edges. But what I'm trying to do is more or less what I would do if I were on site, and just indicate it as quickly as I can and as understated as I possibly can.
Benjamin wants to know if does pushing out with your brush ruin the bristles?
No. I mean, if you beat the heck out of your brush, yeah, but no. I'm not. I mean, it may look like I'm being pretty gentle. It's the medium. If your paint's not thin enough, then you're probably going to kind of be pretty hard on the bristles. But my paint's pretty, so I'm just barely touching that brush down. It's just, I'm not pressing hard, just literally. Again, and I've a common phrase I used, a couple of you have quoted it back to me, let the brush do the work.
Well, that's easy for you to say.
See, I don't like that. That looks stupid. That's okay. We'll fix it. And these are assessments that you guys are going to make as you go along in every painting. Every stroke you put down isn't perfection, believe me. If it is, you're a genius and you should be doing these demos.
Does that mean you're a genius?
No. Far from it. Far from it. Oh, so we're getting kind of the feeling of those edges. I don't want to spend too much time because we've got a lot of stuff to cover here. So it is so cool to just have a neat brush that you can kind of just play with. And this, you can get a lot of these number 8s. I don't know why, whether I'm doing a figure, whether I'm doing a landscape, these number 8s tend to be kind of what I call a workhorse brush for me. If somebody said you can do a painting, but I'm only going to allow you to pick one brush and you've got to use that one brush all the way through, I would pick a number 8, either a flat or a filbert. Because for me, I can get tiny little marks with it like that, or I can get big massive marks. And that's pretty much the way you put your paint on your brush and how you hold your brush, the amount of pressure you put on your brush, all of that comes into play. Let's get that covered. A little bit more green. I'm using that paint up pretty rapidly. Green, the brown, the blue, and a little radiant. A little bit more green with a little brown. Pretty close, huh? I don't want to worry about these edges too much because I got to paint the little building. But as long as I've got this nice mass here, I want to get it in, and I'm going to need to darken it probably. So this is just, as I often use this term, a placeholder. It kind of tells me that there's something there. And as long as I've got that color mixed up, let's move it over here. Let's get it right in here. So touch darker, but I want it. I'm going to want this to be darker because it's up more in our face. It's the things that are in the distance that we want a little lighter. So this area here is actually a little lighter, a little bluer than the area I'm painting in right now. And again, placeholders. Why? Because I still have to paint all that green, which is what we're going to move into next. I'm going to move into the green, but before I do, I think I'm going to paint a little bit of the shadow areas, adding a little bit more blue and radiant blue to that mixture. So it's not quite as warm as it was. I don't like that. Let's get rid of that. Let's paint that shadow in. Paint that shadow in up here as it sits back in here. Unify them. Look for the value. Don't sweat the color right now. Make it approximate, get it close, but don't lose a lot of sleep if you don't end up with the exact color.
Jess Hillardy said sometimes nature looks normal in real life, but weird in paint. Best advice I got in undergrad was do what's best for the painting, even if you stray from your reference.
You know what? I'll tell you why you're absolutely right. You probably already know this. It's because when someone looks at the piece, they don't look at what you painted. They look at your painting, and it's your interpretation of what you painted that will attract somebody. It's not the actual place. For example, let me give you a simple example. Let's say you've all been here. You've all been to this cool little area called Tamales in Western Marin. All right. You have memories of it, but you don't remember the exact color of a building. You don't remember the exact shadows. You don't remember any of that. You kind of remember that it's, kind of a neat place. So truthfully, you can interpret, I'm going to add, like I said, I added warms in there. In this background, I can add other colors. We can come in with a little bit more blue. But I want to push it back further, keep the value similar, and just rub in a little blue there, rub it down. I'm doing some interpretation here. So what we're doing is we're creating a little atmosphere between this tree and this tree. Okay, pretty simple. We do the same thing over here. Just take the same color, add a little bit right in here. Just kind of smear it in there. Starts to unify the piece since I've got blues in here already, and this gives me a lot of room to go darker. So let's start to get some of these greens in because it's really going to be the bulk of the lower part of this piece. So I'm going to take a bigger brush this time. I'm going to grab a number. Let's see what I got handy here. What do I have handy? I want a good size brush. Oh, here we go. This is great. That's like a 12, I think. This is a number 12, flat. I use the heck out of it. You can see how dirty the handle is. So I'm gonna mix a green using sap using a little radiant blue, yellow, and a little ochre. And that looks pretty good. And a lot of medium, because I could, first stroke I put down, I could feel that paint was very sticky. I'm going to throw a little bit more green into it. And we're going to go right in here. I'm just going to trust myself and assume I'm correct. Paint like you know what you're doing. Assume you're wrong. I just said I'm going to assume like I'm doing it correctly too. I see a lot of warm in there. So I actually took some ochre and some orange, mixed it into the green. And as we come down lower, I'm letting other colors intermingle. I'm letting the warms intermingle with the cools. I see it. It's not, I'm not inventing something, you guys. I see it. I may be exaggerating a little bit, but I do see it. Okay, we'll get that down underneath that tree. And there's several warms. I'm using the cad orange, or the cad orange hue, but I could also use the asphaltum, which is just a darker version. So there's a little asphaltum in there. And as it goes back, maybe gets a little bit more green back in here. So I'm constantly kind of working out of this one pot of green that I mixed up, and I've got little variations all over the place. And so I'm not just sitting down and mixing a new color each time. There's a little bit of light that sneaks right about in here. Oh, I see a nice little passage of light happening about here. Okay, a little passage of light kind of coming back over here. We'll leave it alone. I don't want to, you can spend forever in these wonderful little areas. But in a time frame that you're giving yourself, in this case, 90 minutes, you got to keep moving. You can't dwell. And if you're painting plein air, you kind of have to keep moving to also, because literally what's happening is light is changing. A cloud may come over and cover. So you're moving around. Let's keep that green and let's make it a little bit stronger. So I'm taking more yellow and using the radiant blue and the yellow together. Maybe I might throw a little green in it, but I want more of a yellow cast right about here. And that's my first guess. And it's probably lighter. I'm going to throw a little bit yellow and a little bit of white into that color. And medium. Now, why am I throwing medium? Because I can feel that the yellow is a little bit stiffer, a little bit more stiff than some of the other pigments. And because of that, I have to loosen it up a little bit. So there's we got a nice bright. I also see as it moves up in here, it almost gets a little orange. So I'm going back to a little bit more ochre, maybe even a touch orange in it. And for the instead of white, I'm using I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought because I'm thinking. I'm using Naples Yellow Light. I don't know why the hell I couldn't just drop off my tongue, but it didn't. Okay, we want to get a little bit of that green back in there so it sits behind. Okay, now there's a green passage right here. So I'm going to take a little bit of the green, sap green, mix it into that color and just pop it in there. Let's pop that passage in and let's mix it in with the other colors and scumble in a base tone that I can augment, I can change at any time. But I need something to start with, just so I have coverage. And that's kind of what I'm shooting for at this particular time in the painting. Coverage, I want to get enough of it covered, and then I'll go back and fix whatever I have time to go back and fix. And enhance whatever I have time to go back and enhance, or refine, what you pick your term. And obviously I switched over to this brush, which is like I said, a number 12 rosemary flat. I literally picked this brush because coverage. I wanted more coverage. There's a little bit of radiant blue. So I'm mixing a few other colors in here, trying to keep this area somewhat interesting so it doesn't become flat and dull. And I can see more of a green passage that I could pull from there, pull it down, move it up. And just, I am really just using the tip of that brush, you guys. I'm not pressing too hard. Okay, so we have kind of a nice movement of tone back in that region. So now I'm going to keep my eye on time. I'm about 25 minutes in, a little bit behind where I'd like to be, but not way behind. So now I'm going to try and hit some of these green passages back by this building. There's one right here. And I'm just picking one of the greens that I have already kind of mixed up. It's there. It's just a smear of a variety of, it's one green, and then I just kept mixing other greens right into that green. So it's not the same green over and over again. A little more ochre in it this time. There we go. I kind of like that. Let's follow this as it comes over. Actually, it's up a little higher, moving it up. And it comes right about here, behind some trees. Again, when you're on location, it is even easier to lose your place when you're than when you're painting from a piece of reference. And I'm approaching this as a location painting. So as pretty much I do anytime I'm doing like an 18 by 24 in 90 minutes, basically you're approaching it like a piece that you're doing from a model or on location, or something's a little passage of light right about in here. It's up higher, it's about in there. So let's leave it alone. We can always take this color, paint down, clean it up, and paint a little of that tree back into it. No, not enough. Painting into wet paint. When you paint into wet paint, you got to be delicate. You can't be heavy-handed because you just smear that paint around. Okay. I don't see any others, so I'm going to leave that alone right now. It looks to me like that hill might come down here, there. Now, remember, I didn't want to mess with those edges yet. And that's because I think you can see that I've got to paint these buildings in. Now, there's a rooftop. There's this wonderful kind of dark brown. I'm painting it dark brown, but it's kind of a neutral brown. So there's some blue mixed into it. Back in the shadows. And then there's a warmer rooftop. So I just took the color that I was painting with and added some ochre and a little bit of the cat orange hue because I wanted it to be warmer. It's almost a burnt sienna type of a color, but I don't have burnt sienna laid out. So you kind of mix up something accordingly. And there's that rooftop, a little bit more light on. There's actually a cool little shadow on it too, I see. Shadow kind of comes across right about in there. Okay, leave it alone. Have to talk. I say that to myself when, I'm saying it to you guys. I say that to myself when I'm painting a lot. It's like I get something and all of a sudden I realize I'm fussing on an area and all of a sudden I'll catch myself saying, leave it alone, leave it alone. You know better. You're supposed to know better. A little shadow on that rooftop. I want to get those trees back there. I kind of like that. There's a little light on the edge of it, but I don't want to mess with it right now. I'm going to start to deal with some of the darks on the buildings. And the only one that I really see is the rooftop, which is quite dark, a little on the warm side, a little asphaltum, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and a little more blue. I just got a second look at it. It's a lot bluer than I thought. Yep, it is. It's cooler than it is warm. So I have to really augment that color and change it back a little bit more towards a blue, which that is. There we go. So we're going to get that roof line in. There's that part of it. down, kind of leave where the dormer is, and it's kind of right in, no, it's over a little bit, it's about it there. And then we'll get the bottom, and then we get the lower roof on the porch, which is about here. This comes down and comes over. And then just by lifting up your brush, you get your point. There's a tree trunk I just noticed happening right. I didn't catch it earlier, and I see a building back behind it, but it's right about there. Okay. Clean that up, diffuse that a little bit, because it becomes part of a tree, so we don't want it totally standing out. All right, so we're breaking up the space. Got this laid in. Now I'm going to lay in the sides. I'll go back with my smaller number 8 filbert, and I'm going to mix up very dark but very influenced by the sky, so it's quite blue, and it's this part. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit of an intense blue, so I'm going to throw a little bit of alizarin into it and make it a little more violet. It is a grayer blue in essence, so let's see what that looks like. That feels a little bit better. Okay. It's still blue, but it's quite a gray blue now, and it extends from up here down here, and then there's a darker porch area down below. So when I do that, the next thing I want to do is I want to say, do I see any other areas that are like that? Yes, I do. All right, one is right here. It's a little bit lighter, so I throw a little bit more of the radiant type blue into it to liven it up a little bit. It's not quite as dead of a blue as we have down here. And it's probably because it's more exposed to the sky. It's not as hidden down low. So we're going to go here, here. I'm going to get that in there. Kind of like that. I'm going to do a little bit of variation. So I bring a little bit of that same kind of blue up into some of these areas. A little bit on the steeple part of this church, not quite as blue. So I'm going to take that same color I was just working with, through a little bit of a Naples yellow into it, Naples yellow light. And we're going to paint. I'm going to make the steeple a little taller, simply because I don't like the way it lined up with that line. So I'm painting it up a little higher for compositional purposes.
So
Remember, go ahead. Remember, you guys can do that. A photographer can't do that. I guess they could probably go back with photo, and make it work. But generally, we as artists have the ability to be able to change that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just Kevin had a question about what are your thoughts about layers in a painting? Do you feel you need to go over the canvas multiple times?
Yes.
Just one time?
I can answer that before you even finish the question. Yes, I feel that you should go. And if you guys recall, one of the things I tell you in this is, you just, and it's same with plein air painting. You do not have the opportunity to do as many layers. Where if you're doing a studio painting for yourself, you may have a chance to go back and do 20 or 30 layers, or I like to call them passes. It's a term that I kind of came up with years ago, and I still use it. It's how many passes you make over your overall painting. Ideally, you make as many passes as you need to make the painting work. But what I just said is ideally, and that's more of what you might do in a studio. On location, you might only get 2 or 3 passes, maybe 4, and maybe you'll have an area that you might get a little bit more into. But generally speaking, you're not going to get as many passes. So, but to answer that question, absolutely, you want to be able to go over it, because that's what richens up a painting. This is 1, that's 2. But if I really want to make that interesting, I might go back into that tree a little later and bring a few little warms into it, just to make it. But if I don't have the time and I'm doing a plein air piece and the light changes too radically, then I can't. So I usually say generally on a sunny day, you've got about 2.5 hours before the light changes so much that it becomes something different. And then you're either painting from memory or you're using 2 or 3 different light sources. Now, I just painted along the Truckee River a couple of weeks ago, and I painted about 2.5 hours. And I did notice there were things that occurred towards the end that I actually employed in the painting that were not there in the beginning. But if you do too much of it, it looks phony. It does not look real. Now there's cast shadows down here, so we want to kind of indicate that. We got this here, we got it here, we want it there. Let's see, anything else I need to do before I started on some of the lights? Maybe this tree, get a little bit of tone in there. I'm glad you asked that question about how many layers you make, because I think that's an important point that all of you need to realize in these demos that at least I've been doing. These are quick demos, relatively quick. And what you're capturing is the essence of the image and not the exactness. And so as much as it might be really wonderful to go back in and do some beautiful second, third, and fourth passes over the painting, unfortunately, the time constraint kind of makes it almost impossible to do that. So, but in an ideal situation, great. Now, if any of you are outside painting on a gray day, different, or if you're painting from a model, different, artificial light. You can keep that light on that model as long as you want, still life. This is more like a plein air piece, simply because of the time constraint. So you can see, even in that little, I've got a lot of different color variations on that tree. I want to get some of the lights in, then I want to move down in here. Then I want to go back and make other passes. So if I can get in the next, say, 15 to 20 minutes, if I can get kind of the light slate in the way I want them, I will have enough time, hopefully, to go back and give it a little bit more oomph.
A technical term?
That's a technical term, oomph. Every artist needs oomph. I just decided after all the ugly skies here that I don't know where all of you were located, but being here in California and seeing all these yellow, orange skies, felt like I wanted to paint a blue sky. And that was my reason for choosing this, truthfully. I had a couple other pieces that I was thinking of doing. Well, I like that. It's an accidental, happy accident. Little blue happened in on that roof. Put a little bit of it here. Those two roofs tend to be. Now, what color would you say those are? I mean, they're very neutral. They're very gray. And there's a little touch of warmth, but not too much. So it's like, you got to be careful with what you're doing. And sometimes I'll just lay a color down, realize it's wrong, push another color into it until I get close to pretty much the color that I think needs to be there. The other thing I'm always aware of is I am painting on a toned surface. So this surface is not white. So even though this may look very light, in essence, it's not as light as it looks if you were to compare it to white. Okay. You keep going. There's some other little elements back in here, which are more or less what I call nice marks. They're really not. I'm going to switch back to a smaller brush here. Let's see what we're going to go with. I've got a filbert here, or a long bristled egbert. Love these things for certain things. They're just phenomenal. They're good for doing stuff like this, weeds, trees. But I'm going to take white. Now I'm going to paint the lights on these buildings. White and Naples yellow light. Now we can see how, is that light or is that light? There we go. And that's not pure white. There's a lot of Naples yellow in that because we want that sunlight. So let's start there. Now that I know it, I'm going to put my little fingernail down here. And we're going to paint that part of the building on the side. Again, that's why, now you see why I didn't paint those, the leaves of those trees or the fronds that come out from it. Because if I did, I just have to muck it up with this. Okay, the steeple. And there's other little details there that we'll get into. Edges. Architecture, crisp compared to trees. Human form, crisp compared to trees. Hair, more like trees. Got a little perspective problem going on there. We'll fix it a little bit. No, I'll fix it right now. There we go. Okay, let's get the steeple on that one. Naples, white. Now, I'm adding medium to this too, because I want this to be able to go down easily. I don't want to have to sit and push it into the paint. So again, I'm going to clean my little fingernail out because I'll mess it up otherwise. And we'll go right here.
What size brush is that?
This is a larger, I don't even know what number this is.
I can't see it.
When I grab these rosemary brushes, I just go, geez, I like that brush. I grabbed it. So this is a number 4, I think. Long bristled filbert. Or some companies refer to them as Egberts. Crisp edges on the cast shadows. Oh, up in here, kind of little dappled cast shadow right up in. Okay, a little bit up in there. Now, on this, it's at this point, it hits the roof, and then it comes in right there. So we get a little bit of a jog. So we're starting to get the light effect, which is what you want at this point before we start worrying about any feeling of detail or anything such as that. You want that feeling of light. I actually just push my brush into a little bit of ochre to warm it up. So we kind of have it now on the roof of that, which I'm going to go back to that little sketch brush I was using right in the beginning. Let's see what I got. I've got a nice little sketch brush to use. Just got to grab this brush. I don't even know what this brush is. I want to get a little bit more cast shadow on that. And I want to go back into the roof. And it's cool. It's not quite that color, but it's leaning more towards that blue. That's about here. And a little bit warmer comes out. Probably out a little too far. And we get a little bit of light in there. So we get a little bit of kind of dappled light on that roof. And I think I'm going to go back and add a little bit more of the shadow. So if you don't get it by just hitting the light, you just go back and clean it up with the shadow. And a little touch of light right there on the roof. Okay, we leave it alone. It feels about right. Well, I've got this brush. I'm going to go back to this brush here. I prefer it. The filbert, the long bristle filbert. We're going to pick up, not quite as, I don't want it as bright as the light on the building. So it's about like there. That feels pretty good. Okay. A little bit light right there. A little piece of light on a chimney, it looks like. These are those little touches that are going to make it work. The dormer, by the way, that sits about here. That's too light. So I just take some of the darker color, push it back, and go over it one more time. The value feels correct. I don't like the paint character, but the value feels correct. And there's a couple of dark windows. We could add all that stuff, hopefully, as we go towards finish. Now, there's a little piece of roof sneaking out right about here behind it. I see it. Okay, and there's light, warm light, actually. So I'm going to add, I took that light color, but there's warm light hitting right on the edge there, and a little bit on the there, and a little bit there. Okay, so we're starting to clarify, for lack of a better word, I'm starting to clarify some of these areas and refine them to a degree. I want to get that tree down, and then the little pieces that stick up. I don't know what you refer these to. Okay, so it's starting to feel like I'm getting detail. There's no detail yet. They're just, everything is shape right now. Truthfully, it's just shape. And the side of it has a little bit of light. Not bright light, but a little bit light. I want to make it stand out in the background a little bit if I can. And then it's got that almost a steeple type of a centered right about here. Okay. So it's shaping up. I'm going to start to put some of the information in these guys and then move down. Actually, let's get coverage first. I'm going to take my giant number 12 rosemary, and I'm going to push a tone in here. It's warmer, and I'm going real thin with it. I just mixed in with the greens that I kind of a little bit of the asphaltum, probably a little too much because it got really warm on me. So I just toned it down with a little blue. It's not a bad starting point right here. Now look at those edges. Boy, I see violets in them. I see all kinds of interesting colors. So we just want to get, again, initially coverage, and then I want to go darker because it goes darker. So right into that color, more asphaltum, a little bit of blue. If I just use asphaltum by itself, it's so red that it just, because I mixed blue into that, it's still quite red. So we're just going to kind of scrub a lot of this stuff in. I kind of like that, the way the edges are coming out right there. I'm getting good characteristics out of it, which is nice. Now I just mixed a little bit of a alizarin crimson in. Whoa, a little bit, huh? We could call it a happy accident, but I'd be lying. But I sure like the edges that I'm getting there. I'm going to mix some ochre into that color. Same color, a little ochre mixed in. And I'm going to bring some over here. Oh, I kind of like that. That's a nice little touch. I also see some weird cools happening in there. Warms into cools, cools into warms. Right about down here. Over here. And then we get some really interesting violets. So I'm going to take the alizarin white, a little bit of ultramarine. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. That's a little darker than I want. A little more ultramarine, a little bit more white. Let's try it again. That feels good to me. A little bit of I feel more orange, so I'm going with a little bit more orange into it. You get to the point where you kind of feel these colors. It sounds odd, but, and if you guys remember a phrase that I like to use is, and this has to do with whether you're painting a figure, whether you're painting objects, whether you're painting animals, whether you're painting, is energy versus control. Well, I don't want a lot of control up here in terms of refined kind of control. But I do want a lot of energetic marks that kind of feel like the subject that I'm painting. So I'm painting feeling. I'm not painting, it's like when you're painting a portrait, you're painting around a nose, you're painting form, you're painting the character of that individual, the wings of the nostrils. But if you're painting weeds like this, it's not, it's more about the feeling of those weeds than it is about a specific form. The other thing is if I try and paint too much form into that, I've stopped the viewer. You stop the viewer's eyes. You make it too important for something that is, you really are looking past, because even in the photo, we're looking past this. We're not looking at it. So paint it as if it's has a good feeling, but not an exactness. Okay, I'll leave that alone for a little bit. I see where I could get lighter too. So I can take a little bit more white and ochre and maybe a little touch orange, and I can get a little bit, nope, lighter still. And I'm going to add a little bit of my medium to it. This is probably too light, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. I don't care. I kind of like it. I might not like it later. And this is just where you're again, letting the brush do the work. This is the advantage of having a decent brush. I see these guys working with these crummy brushes, students, and honest to God, I mean, I walk up sometimes and I'll say, hey, let me show you what to do. And I go to use their brush, and honest to God, it's like they just handed me a popsicle stick to paint with. So I say, spend your money on brushes, and if you're going to work in your studio, on lighting. Good paints, important. I don't want to diminish the aspect of high quality paint, but if you say what you got to choose one or the other, I'm going to choose the brush, because the brush is what does the work. You're just the hand that holds the brush. Okay, keep that in mind. It's really important.
So we're just laying that on very lightly.
Yeah, I'm almost just trying almost not even to let my brush touch the and if your paint has got to be wet, that's the other thing. Good brush, and then paint consistency. Get that paint consistent. So I kind of have the effect of that's in front of me. Now I want to go back and do a little bit of refinement. And I've got about 45 minutes left here. So let's cross my fingers and let's go for it. First thing I'm going to do is add a little bit. There's a tree right in here. It's got some warm, really beautiful, warm color on it, and I like it. So I'm not going to change it. I'm going to use it. It's right there. And then the shadow of the tree, because it's closer to us than those background trees, I can make a darker, warm green right here. And just go in and literally paint the shadow of that tree as it comes down and helps define the edge. And we kind of smear it in so it kind of falls back in there. Now, it works.
Lori would like to know, what lighting would you recommend if you don't have a north window?
I don't have a north window. I have a southeast window. The lighting, well, let me start by saying I began my career as an illustrator, and a lot of you guys know that. And as an illustrator, you don't just paint daytime. You paint daytime, nighttime, morning time,
Middle of the nighttime.
middle of the nighttime. Painting some light back in these trees back in here, by the way. But really, so you do a lot of different. So it was very important when I was illustrating that I had good lighting, and it took me a while to figure it out. There are types of fluorescent lights that are called natural daylight, and they're quite good. It's what I have. I have 3 banks of them in my studio, and they're spaced all over so they give good light. It's like when you guys paint outside, hopefully everybody knows this, but you don't want the sun on your canvas. So you don't want bright light on your canvas. If you have bright light on your canvas, I guarantee you're going to paint too dark, right? It's because you compensate for the light. If bright light, in order to get a color to look good, you got to make it a dark color. All of a sudden you walk indoors into what we would call, where someone would view it, and it looks completely wrong. So north light in general is a very good form of natural light. It really is. And if you can't use north light, the best thing to do is to find, I literally went to several stores and asked natural white light, and I looked at them. And so I picked some. This sounds hard to believe, but we've been in our house now over 20 years, and I've not changed the lights. They're the same lights that I bought 20 years ago. They have not, but they're a little bit expensive, but literally they have lasted that long. Hope I just didn't jinx myself. So I'm making nice little marks that give a character, a feel of detail to what I'm looking at. So I'm going to go back and we're going to do that so I don't have to worry about it right at the end. First thing I'm going to do is go back in with kind of a nice dark, and I'm going to put the 2 windows in that dormer. That's a little too much brown. Also, again, you're painting on at least 1 or 2 layers of paint at this point. Therefore, your paint has got to be very wet, because if it's dry, it's going to smear right into that color. All right, so we've got there. Now we've got a window right about in here. I made up a window. I wasn't trying to, but what the hell? And then we're going to look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I made marks there on purpose, and they're a little too warm. I can see right now. So I added a lot more blue to that color. And I am going to grab my maul stick or my arm, whichever, but in this case, my maul stick, brace it, and I'm going to, because I want to be a little more accurate. So I'm going to paint that in. Whoop. It's my paint, believe it or not, was not wet enough, because I started pushing the paint around. There, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do it. I've messed up my marks a little bit, but that's okay. It feels okay. And I'm gonna put another little window in here because it feels kind of vacant with just that one. I'm gonna go back to the kind of blue color I was using. This is where you correct. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to, but I do want to clean that up just a little bit. There we go. There we go. See if there's a little there, a little cast shadow, probably from a bush or a shrub there. And with that white, one nice thing about the lights, is it's just basically 2 colors I've been using, white and Naples yellow. And I want to bring it over a little bit more and let this, because it's a cast shadow. So we're getting some lights breaking down onto that. And bring that light up there just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for a second. I'm going to go over to this building. Now, there are windows, but and there's a little cast shadow below the roof. I don't know if you guys can see it. There's a little cast shadow. And it tends to feel slightly warm. And it's right. I'm going to use this as a guide. There we go. That worked. Some of what I'm doing now has to do with something I've talked about before. It's beginning to see things in the proper order. If you start looking for all these details off the bat, you will not get what makes it work. But if you put them in at the appropriate time, everything is already working. It's like I use the same terminology when I'm talking to bigger students about painting eyes. And it goes back to something John Singer Sargent used to say. It's almost that the painting is begging for you to put the eyes in. If you force them in too soon, you don't have structure. You need structure. If you put them in at the appropriate time, generally you have, what that means is you've already indicated the structure. So you want to get these elements in at the right time. So there's 4 windows on the side of that church. They're not dark. Okay, and they're kind of warm. So I mixed up a color, a little darker than the roof. And we'll start here. We want to get 4 of them in. There's a buttress too, I just noticed. Down. And the second one is about here. This is where you get, this reminds me, this is very much like plein air painting where you're going, oh, I think that's about the right spot. You put it in and half an hour later, you realize you put it in the wrong spot. And then you improvise. Okay, so we got the basic 4 in there. Now, down at the base, there's a little bit of a buttress there, and a buttress there, and one here, and here. Now, there's a window. That is actually a pilaster, so to speak, on the side of the building. At least that's what it appears like. And then there's a window right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure I didn't need to count, but it made me feel better.
What size brush did you use for that?
It's just a small, it's a synthetic. I don't even know. It's a small little.
That's okay.
And there's some little activity back in here. The top of the roof or the edge of this looks like it gets a little bit lighter. And the top looks like it's got a, I don't know what they refer to these as. It's almost a vein on that top. And it's a little bit lighter than the rest of it. And then I can take that same color, and on this side of the church, there is a window. And on the inside, there is another opening with a bell. And the bell is much darker. I'm not trying to paint a bell, by the way. Just I'm putting marks in that feel good. Then we've got a nice little arched window right there. And we're going to bring that tree up over it. And we'll go back to this, and I see very, very faint. I don't want it to look, but I see a window here. And I see a shadow under the roof line, much the same as I did, except it's about here. So it leaves a little bit of a light gap there. And there's a little bit of light, a little bit of a window. You almost can't see it. And then on the shadow side, I call them a window. It's more of an opening. I forget what these things are called. It's the bell tower. So it's probably, that's too dark. Doesn't bother me a lot, but it is too dark. I don't like the shape of that roof. I want to fix it. That feels better. And I don't like the single window. But you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I just realized trees are going to overlap that a little bit. So I'm not going to worry too much at this moment because we still have to paint those tree shapes back in front. So I've got that. Now, next thing I'm going to do, I see these little indications of forms in the background, and they're shapes. Activity as I like the concept of activity. It takes it out of looking too sterile. And sometimes you can even add activity. I'm going to add a little thing to that rooftop, by the way. I mean, you can do so many different things as you're painting. Bring a little light here. I'll tell you why, because I want to get a little light back in the bell tower right there. Just a little piece of light there. Okay. See a little bit of a activity. I'm not going to paint everything. It's just I see a post sticking up there, so we're just going to put a little bit of a feeling of a post there. I've got kind of what I want. Now I've made it I've just completed pretty much one pass. All right. And not all of it. I just noticed another spot I need to get a green right here. Comes out from here. Goes up to the edge of that church. It widens out here. And then it fades. So we get, that really helped, boy. Whew, glad I put that in. That helped. This is cleaning up. Something back here. I don't like that vacant spot I left, and that area there bothers me a little bit. There's some, looks to me like there's almost some wildflowers, some yellow. Back here. And I see a little bit of that over. Yeah, a little bit right here too. I take pure yellow and a little white now. Let's see if I can push it a little bit more. More than I wanted. It's good idea. Okay. Now, let's take some of these trees that are in the foreground and see what we can do about giving them better shapes and add a little bit of information back into these trees. There's a couple of trees actually right darker green. I already have a nice dark mixed up, but there's a couple of, this one tree is right here. And then there's another tree back behind it. And then this whole tree comes in front. Okay, so let's put light on those two trees. Not a lot, but a little bit. Let's try. That feels pretty good. And okay, so we've got those two trees. That helped. It's starting to bring a little dimension and life to it. I'm going to put a little bit of dimension into this tree, nowhere near as much as the one I just did. So I added a little bit more green to it. That's still too light. Try it again.
Can you make them also?
So we're adding just a little bit of modeling to this tree. And a little bit of, I'm going to do a little bit, there's a tree right here. I'm going to go a lot more green, same color. And we're going to bring so that's just kind of adding a little really subtle form to that tree before I go in and paint this tree pretty much as a shape. That's going to be one of my darkest areas. So I took pure green, a little bit of ultramarine, and the sap green. So it, excuse me, the asphaltum, so it stays a little bit warmer. And I see it as, whoa, look at that nice dark. Hopefully you guys can see that. And a lot of times you get reflection. So, but if I make the stroke that way, you can see it. That'll bring that up. That's an interesting point. When you're working with dark paint, particularly a thicker dark paint, you'll get a lot of reflections. And the way to avoid that, if you put a stroke this way, the ridges catch the light but if you put a stroke this way, they tend not to. So let me get some of these neat little shapes just by pulling that brush. If my paint's a little drier than I want it, so I added a little bit of the safflower oil. Oops, because I have other mixtures in there. Okay, just stood back for a second and it's okay. Kind of get a nice edge to that bottom. And we'll take the little number 8 that I rave about so much, and we'll put that in. There's another tree trunk right there, and it comes down further. And I'm mixing other paints into it, so I got to go back and remix that color, because what's happening is every time I'm putting a stroke down over wet paint, I pick up some of that wet paint. So now we're going to come in with a ground shadow. Sorry, I keep blocking you with my mall stick. I keep forgetting that there's actually people watching. I keep thinking I'm talking to myself sometimes. Now, some nice shadows. This is all this little stuff that, man, if you have time, you can go crazy. It's beautiful little cool shadows. Blue. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue and a little radiant and kind of mix that color off to the side just a little bit. It's kind of this color. And there's all these cool little shadows going on. So let's start with this one. And we're clarifying these shadows that were, I indicated them, but I did them so quickly that in essence, some of them just weren't right. Okay, that shadow's back here. We're going to clean up. I don't like that part of it. I want to get that up there. I see some, oh, beautiful. I just noticed, this is seeing things in the proper order. I just noticed fence posts. I love fence posts. The reason I love fence posts is it gives you another form of what I call activity. It gives you that additional, and it's a different form of activity. Put a little of the tree holes in. And again, going back to a question that was asked, if you have time, I mean, I could probably go back and work on these tree edges for a good hour, 2 hours maybe, just to get the appropriate character of those tree edges. Again, but if I'm painting on location, I can't. You just don't have the time. Just like now, I don't have the time. So we're going to take this big tree. It's a little bit of a foreground tree. I got a nice base tone in there. It's not too dark. And I want to bring some of these tree shapes, and I want to overlap the building. Bring a couple of them. I'm going to push it, I think. And I use the brush a lot of different ways because you don't want everything to look like it's the same stroke repeated. I mean, it just gets boring. Oh, I like that. Every now and then you do something and you go, wow, I actually did that. As opposed to going, oh crap, I did that. Happens both ways. Get some nice edges here. And I do them quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. Got to keep the paint wet. That's probably the biggest key. Keep that paint wet. You do these kind of trees, a lot of times just by pushing, you get a better edge characteristic than if you sit and try and go ding, ding, ding. So you're better, like I said, if you can let your brush, you get a good brush, let your brush do the work. You just kind of guide it along and be careful about the pressure you put on it. Put too much pressure, it's not gonna look good. So we got some of the tree edges starting to work okay. Want to kind of clarify that tree a little bit more so I just don't have the light there. So I have a little bit of tone going on elsewhere in the shadow. Whoop, want to be careful not to get too dark with it. It's going to pop out of that whole background. All right, in this tree, we can add a little bit of form. Just be careful you don't go too far with it. Just slightly lighter. I don't even know if you guys can see that. Hopefully you can. I know you can see that because that was a mistake. It was just, that was too light, too quick. So we just go back and smear a darker color over it, bring a little bit more paint. Oh, I see some worms too. I just caught it. So I added some orange to that. And it's not light enough. A little bit more of the green. I can up here. I can actually add a little bit in here because I see it. I just don't want to go too far. These are background trees, so you really don't want to call it. You want them basically to be nice shapes. Let's get into this tree a little bit, add a little bit of color to it. Even though it doesn't have as much color, I can see hints of worms. So I can apply some of that wonderful little rich color, and it gets really, that helped. I can take this little brush and go back with the greens. Let's see what we got here. We use my maul stick so I can be a little bit more, all the maul stick does is it lets you rest your hand down. I don't like the color, but I want to be a little bit more accurate now with the shadow shapes. Because it's not just one simple shape. While I've got the brush, I'm going to take a little liner that I use. These are just these wonderful little watercolor type brushes. And you can use watercolor brushes for things like that I'm going to do right now. I'm going to add some posts. And you want a little tiny brush for that. You can use a little pointed brush. I got a nice, let me see if I can find that one. My favorite one is a long, I don't see it right now. There it is. That might be it. Nope, there it is. It's got a beautiful tip on it. It's a very long, it's a #2 rosemary round. And it's perfect for doing this kind of stuff, you guys. It's absolutely perfect. You can kind of, I'm going to rest this down and we're going to put some posts in. One, whoop. Now that was a test stroke to see if it's about right. That's about right. Okay. I'm not even looking now. I'm just making them up where I think they ought to be. A couple of them have a little piece of white on them. So you can go back to your original light color that I was using for the white and Naples yellow. And I can add, let's let this one, I see a few have a little light on them. Right there. Maybe right there. See a couple little lights. It's a great little brush. I can go back and do a lot of little tiny stuff with this.
How long is the mall stick?
This mall stick?
Yeah.
I don't know. I made it. It's just a dowel and I got one of these stoppers on it. What is this? 36, about 36 inches, maybe 40. You know, it's whatever works for you. So this is where you slow down and you go back and you add information that will actually help the piece. And you use that, but I know a lot of people will start with that little brush and it's way too much to begin with it. There are things like, I see a little bit of a tree trunk right here that I could begin to pull out right here, right there. A couple little lights back in here. I can see the light get a little bluer. I love that. I love these cast shadows that occur from trees, that happen on the sides of buildings. I look for that very often. I kind of enjoy that as a subject that I can add to my painting. This now comes out. Now I'm worried about being more precise now, in case, I guess that's probably the best thing to do is, and I'm looking from place to place. I just noticed a nice piece of light. And I want to go back into the greens a little bit too. So right there, nice little piece of light happening on that. I'm going to go back one more time on this. I think that would help. Maybe a little bit of light on the roof. Maybe a little bit. Oh, wow. I just noticed windows back here. I didn't see them before. The nice thing about this, it's got a nice long handle on it, so you can really rest your hand on a maul stick and do it. So we've indicated, so we got the windows back in there. That's shaping up pretty well. Let's see if we can add a little bit more interest to the greens, and then maybe just a little bit more to the sky. Let's go up in here first. I'm going to take yellow. Let's grab. Yeah, it's going to take the big brush. Brush I was using for this. Oh, didn't want to do that. Just grab that little. Okay. going to take my number 12 that I used, clean it a little bit, get kind of some of the dirt out of it, grab some of that yellow, bring it down on a clear spot in the palette, add a little white to that yellow, a little bit more yellow, a little bit of green. And I can see some warm too, but I'm going to go right here. The ridge. A little bit more white and a little bit of more medium mixed into it. Okay, I like that. Now as it moves over, I'm going to bring a little bit of orange into that, little, right about in here. And maybe a little bit more. Mix it with a little bit more green. That's pretty good. Okay, a little darker green. And I want to break this up a little bit more. It's kind of a warm, it's got a green with brown in it. It's a little olive. And then as it gets closer to that edge, it gets more green. So the paint now is a little bit more body, meaning I'm using a little bit of a thicker paint. And that's what we're doing is exactly what I stated. Warms into cools, cools into warms. So I'm going to clean the edge of the shadow up now. Oh, I see something really nice. The ridge comes up on that side of the shadow. And the shadow extends to there. I don't like the base of that tree. I lost it. There we go. And I want to make sure I get the orange. How are we doing here? Oh, we're good. I almost have 5 minutes. I haven't gone back into the sky yet. It's a nice dry brush. It gives it another way to get character of those weeds is a little bit of a dry brush. So you're just almost barely depositing paint. Are there any other areas that I want to? No, nothing in particular. I'm just looking to see if there's any other. I can see a little bit of kind of scuffing of kind of some dirtier tones back in those greens. Back in here. Back in there. I don't like that passage of orange. I didn't realize till I stood back. It's just too much. So I want to take some of that green and just kind of go over it a little bit. So it's there, but it's kind of underneath. Feels a little bit better. Okay. I'm going to take that original brush that I was using, my little, or my number 8. Clean it as best I can. Go back to the radiant blue with white, with medium. A little bit of Naples yellow and white. And I see a little feeling of cloud. I kind of like it. It breaks that up. It's almost not even there. And as it moves across, it's weird. As it moves across, it gets a little bit pink. So took that color, added white, and added a little bit of alizarin crimson. And I'm going to, from this point over, I'm going to push it like that. And then I'm going to push it right back into the paint. It actually looks pretty good. I think I'm going to add more of it over here. So now I want to go back to kind of similar, a sky color, and just kind of etch away some of the mistakes that I made. As I said, if I were doing I could easily go back and spend hours just characterizing the edge of these trees a little bit more. Never did like that too much. Just etch away here and there. And if you go too far, you mix up your tree color, you do your tree. Positive, negative, as I've said many times. That's starting to work. There are areas that work better than other. I like skies that aren't that flat. So what I'm doing, I have a mixture that's a little bit grayer right there. And I'm just kind of using it and working it into the sky. The sky isn't one color. A lot of times as the sky goes down more towards the horizon, it gets lighter and sometimes warmer. So you could actually go back in here and here. Pick up that horizon. Got to be careful because your paint's really wet now. So if I hit one of those tree fronds, I'm going to get some real dirt into my sky, and I don't want to. Right about here. So we get sky's a lot more interesting. I don't know if you guys can see it. I got the slope of that building completely wrong. I don't like the, I'm just going to clean one thing up. I don't like the rounded edge at the top. So I'm going to go back and that's it. Just sharpen up that edge. It bothered me. Couple little things back in here. Got that in there. Yeah. We're just about done, you guys. So as I said, if this were a studio painting, I'd be going in and working on the tree edges for a long time to really get the character. I've got pretty much what I call a plein air character of the trees, as opposed to a really refined studio type of painting. But you know, there's something to be said for spontaneity, and I mean, many artists much prefer the spontaneous feeling of a understated plein air piece than they do a piece that has been tremendously worked on. I actually like them both. I love to be able to go back and nurture into a studio painting for a long time, and then at the same time, I love that there's a beauty of that spontaneity in plein air work that it's hard to resist. It's just neat. So, but I think we're about where I would like to be for at least a 90-minute session. And the last thing I want to do is thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I those of you that actually sit back and watch the whole thing, I'm amazed. It's very nice that you do it. I hope you guys get something out of it. It's fun for me. We started this thing 27 weeks ago, and we're going to carry this pretty much right up through Christmas. Don't know if we'll stop before Christmas or after Christmas, but we're going to keep doing it. I'm going to try and do some, I always look for things that I haven't done, partly for myself. And the other part is because if I've already done it, there's no sense in doing it again because you're not getting anything out of it. So you're seeing that I'm playing here, and I could keep playing for a long time on trying to work warms into cools, cools into warms.
I'm going to show your palette for a second because a few
You're
people
welcome
had
to see my
asked.
palette.
So hopefully that helps.
Don't like that hump. I don't know what the heck I was thinking when I did that. I just stood back and noticed it. This is the kind of stuff you notice later. That right there. So let's get rid of it. Okay, that makes me feel better right there. I'm just looking to see if there's any lot of little things I see. I see some a little bit of that green coming through right here. It's up here. Anyway, I'm going to take my glasses off, and I will thank you all for watching this painting evolve. Stay safe, paint a lot. I do. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Oops. Okey-doke.
That's too dark.
Ciao, ciao.
That feels better.
Okay.